Another technique for paper sculpture is called scoring. And I don't mean scoring points. Scoring in art means to scratch. So I'm going to use a stylus. This is a double-ended stylus. It has two different points on it, and it's just a pointy tool that actually will allow me to scratch into the surface of the paper. I'm actually going to make an indentation into the paper. So scoring is actually a great way to create a little bit of three-dimension in a flat piece of paper. And this is actually really good for organic shapes like leaves and wings and things like that. So the idea with scoring, though, is that you end up bending the paper. People get it confused with folding, and you can use scoring to fold, but this is actually really nice to just draw a line. So I'm going to use this pointed tool, and you probably won't be able to see the indentation that I actually draw down the center of this, but I'm pressing really hard. I'm making an indentation into the paper. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is actually press on either side of that indentation, that line. Just do it real easily at first, because what's going to happen is that paper is going to start to bend right where you've weakened it with that score mark. And then just after a little while, it really starts to bend. And you can see that it's actually kind of curved. It's not a fold, because all folds are straight. Okay, but that gives me now a three-dimensional form. So it's still pretty flat, but it has that nice three-dimensional form to it. And I can do multiple score marks on one piece of paper and get sort of a ruffled or ridged effect. I'm going to show you that with a circle. So I'm going to actually use my compass and draw a circle. I'm going to try to put this in the center because I do need a whole circle. And again, I'm going to mark the center, and then I want to make sure that I'm not going to go off my paper. I'm going to go ahead and draw my circle. So I just use the pencil for the outside, and then I'm going to use my compass. Oops, my compass moved. Okay. And then I'm going to use my compass and my stylus now. And I'm going to go in here and actually draw a circle with my stylus. And then I'm going to come up here and do another one. And so I'm basically making concentric circles using my stylus. Okay. And then I'm going to cut this out. Now when I do this, after I cut it out, this is actually a modified cone, so I want to cut a slit into it. If I tried to pop up the score marks, it won't work because the paper kind of has to move. It has to go somewhere. So I'm going to go ahead and do that in here. I'm going to cut a slit to the center. Okay, I'm just going to show you with this first score mark that basically I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to kind of bend it and kind of walk around. So my thumbs are on either side of that score mark, and that paper will start to pop up or curve right on that indentation that I made. And I'd go really easily at first because I don't want to actually fold my paper. So just pressing lightly will actually start to bend on that score mark. And then to really make it pronounced, I'm going to go ahead and pull it. And then when I flip it over, you can really see how it has created this different cone. So here's a slightly bigger circle that I did earlier where I did both of the ridges, and I just bent them in different directions, and then I haven't even glued them yet, but it's staying in this form, so I can put a little bit of glue on there, and then that's the way to do some curved lines with my score marks. The final scoring, I'm actually going to do a long skinny prism. And so I'm going to actually use a ruler and my stylus and a piece of paper that's a lot wider than I really need. And I could measure this out, but I'm just going to eyeball it. So I'm going to use my stylus, and I'm going to score basically what are going to be the corners of my prism. So this would be really hard to actually just fold without scoring it first. So scoring actually can help me get some really nice folds, and the paper will fold exactly where I want it to. Okay, and then I have to do a fourth one, okay, because I need to have a tab. So I'm actually going to have like 4.5 sides, and that last half side I can cut here in a minute. So what I'm going to do is actually use my ruler to help me fold. So I have my finger kind of underneath the edge of that paper. I'm just going to ease it up, and my paper actually folds right on that score mark. The ruler doesn't have to be right on the score mark, it just has to be close to it. And so I'm going to do that each time, and do that 4 different times on each of my corners. Okay. And then what I can do is really crease it. This is where, if I want to use my spatula or my bone folder, I can really smooth out those creases. Okay. So what I have now is something that has a really long side on it. So this is where I can take my scissors or an X-Acto knife and actually cut that. And I cut this really short, so I can actually put glue right down here on this edge, and then overlap it and glue it together, and I'll have my long skinny prism. It's hard to roll a little cylinder like I did with this big prism, so that's an easy way to make some nice small boxes and prisms. Alright, so I've got all these open-ended forms, but a lot of people want to actually have them closed off so that they look more solid. And there are a couple different ways that I can do that. If I've got something like a square prism or a rectangular prism, I can actually use the top part of it to create the lid or the flaps that will fold over. And what I want to do is actually use my ruler. I'm going to measure to see that this is just under 2 inches. So if I'm around an inch, maybe an inch and a quarter, and I put a mark on each corner, I want to make sure I measure this to make sure that each of these marks is exactly an inch and a quarter. So I've got those 3 corners. I flip it over, I got a corner over here, an inch and a quarter. And what that does is that gives me a mark that I can erase later if I still see it. And I'm actually going to cut this down. So I'm actually going to kind of make flaps like a cardboard box or a box of cereal. I'm going to cut at each corner, cut down to my marks. Do that on each corner. And then what I can do is actually fold this over. Okay, I'm trying to make sure that it lines up with my marks. What I like to do is actually, once I get it folded, pull it back up so I can easily do the next one. Make sure that I have it nice and even. Pop that up. So I go around, do that to all 4 flaps. Okay. If I wanted to do one on this side, I'd want to measure and do the same thing now before I glue it. But what I can do if I'm ready to glue it, I like to hide my seam, so I'm going to tuck that in and tuck that and then overlap it. And I just put a little bit of glue underneath there, and then I have the top of my box enclosed. But when you have some weird shapes like a cylinder or a triangular prism, how can you do that? How can you cover up the end? Well, if I have a flat piece of paper, I can go ahead and stick it on and then trim around it. So that's where I use my bottle of glue. And I'm going to go ahead and shake down some glue. I'm actually going to put little dots of glue right on the edge. Okay, and then I'm going to put that down. And so I want to make sure that I put it down on a piece of paper that's actually bigger than what I need. This is great because, you know, my cylinders don't come out as perfect circles, my triangles don't come out as perfect triangles. So if I just set that aside to dry, then I can come back later and to trim that. Another way to create a closed off end or to attach different forms together is to actually use tabs. So I just take a piece of paper and I'm going to cut a long, skinny strip. And what I'm going to do is cut that into some smaller pieces that I can then fold. And then I just take this and I'm going to fold it. And then I'm going to actually glue it on the inside of my cylinder. So here I have one that's already started where I have all these other tabs. So I can just take my paintbrush and a little bit of glue, put a little bit of glue on there, and then I can go ahead and stick that in. What I like to do is actually fold the tab and make sure that it's right at the top edge. Pick it up, and now I've got tabs on there, and then I can take a scrap piece of paper, again that's bigger than what I actually need, and then I'm going to take my glue and spread it on each one of these tabs. So tabs are good for attaching lids or tops to my forms, but it's also good for attaching different forms to one another. I just might want to make sure that they're hidden inside of an object or behind something so I don't see it. Okay, so I've gone ahead and spread a lot of glue on each one of these, and then I'm going to just go ahead and stick this down. And now what I can do is actually use my pencil and actually press on each of those tabs in there and go all the way around. One thing about using the tabs is that it's actually a lot quicker at this stage than like I did with my triangle. This still isn't dry and I'm not ready to trim. However, with my tabs, since it's on there pretty securely now, I can actually go ahead and trim. And when I trim this, I'm actually going to go ahead and cut right up next to my cylinder and trim that all the way around, trying to be careful not to actually cut my cylinder or to cut the tabs. Trim that off, and now I've got that closed in. That didn't line up perfectly, but maybe that gets hidden in the back. So anyway, that's how I can close off my ends.